Across time and cultures, people who've had near-death experiences or encounters with otherworldly beings often return with strikingly similar revelations. They speak of a higher reality, a realm where consciousness is not bound by time or space. These shared messages challenge our understanding of life, death, and the nature of existence itself. Universal messages about consciousness, abductees and contactees repeatedly describe the beings they encounter as deeply advanced, not just technologically, but spiritually. These beings seem to already know what modern science is only beginning to grasp, that consciousness is the fundamental essence of the universe. They emphasize that we are eternal beings, living temporary, physical experiences. Irreducible Mind, Toward a Psychology for the 21st Century, by Edward F. Kelly and colleagues, is a crucial work that provides a scientific framework supporting the phenomena discussed by John Mack and others in the field of consciousness studies. The book compiles extensive empirical data challenging materialist neuroscience and explores cases of near-death experiences, CSI phenomena, and non-ordinary states of consciousness, all of which intersect with the kind of transformative experiences reported by abductees and contactees. By presenting rigorously documented evidence of mind-brain independence, Irreducible Mind lends credibility to the idea that consciousness is not merely a product of brain activity, but something more fundamental. This supports the core themes found in John Mack's work, where abductees often describe profound spiritual awakenings, the realization that they are not just their physical bodies, and encounters with intelligences that impart knowledge about the nature of reality beyond conventional scientific understanding. Changes in the perception of time and space in association with the abduction phenomenon are sometimes accompanied by a sense of the existence of, or of moving into, other realities or dimensions. This may be difficult for experiencers to articulate clearly. Here is Karen struggling to express her ontological confusion, the altered perception of space and time during her encounters, and their interdimensional quality. Karen calls the other reality she perceives during her experiences the fourth dimension. It's what we call illusion, but it's not illusion. It's not illusion. It exists. It's there. That's where they live. You don't use language when you're in this other experience. You use color, and you have vibration, and everything else. Space-time in this dimension, she says, is irrelevant. John E. Mack, Passport to the Cosmos, Human Transformation, and Alien Encounters.
Presence, kindness, and freedom. Barbara Baratsky channeled messages from Aaron.
I have taught that we are all beings of light. What does that mean? Some of you may be familiar with the meditative experience of the dissolution of ego and body. Those who have experienced that have ascertained that what remains is light. That's all, just light, energy, and awareness. There is no ego in that space. There is no sense of self or other. There is no permanence of form, no individual thought, no selfish will, no personal consciousness. Beyond all the attributes of separate self, there is pure awareness, pure heart-mind. Essence expresses as radiant light, pure sound, awareness, intelligence, and energy. These are direct expressions of that which is. This is what you are. This is what I am.
Question: are you real?
I'm as real as you are. And no, I'm not dead, thank you. I simply exist on a different plane. You are made of light and substance. I am made of only light. When you move beyond the substance of your human form, then you also will be only light until your next human incarnation. You call this death. I call it just a step in the process of our evolution to maturity.
The science of consciousness, beyond the brain. Scientists like Dr. Bruce Grayson and Dr. Edward Kelly have studied NDEs and altered states of consciousness, challenging the physicalist view of the brain. Their work suggests that the brain doesn't create consciousness, it filters it. Just as a radio tunes into signals, our brains might tune into a universal consciousness that exists independently of the physical body. One of the most compelling aspects of NDEs is the presence of veridical perception, instances where individuals report seeing or hearing events during their NDEs that should have been impossible given their physical condition, yet are later verified as accurate. Organizations like IANDS, International Association for Near-Death Studies, have extensively documented such cases, revealing a profound mystery at the heart of consciousness. Consider the case of a man who, during his NDE, encountered a recently deceased relative, someone he believed to be very much alive. Upon returning to consciousness, he later discovered that his loved one had, in fact, passed away just hours before his experience. This suggests that what he encountered was not a mere dream, but an actual connection with another plane of existence. Another well-documented phenomenon involves NDEs perceiving events from a distance, such as accurately recounting private conversations held far from their unconscious bodies. Even more astonishing, some individuals report temporarily hearing the thoughts of those around them during their experience, gaining insights they could not have known otherwise. Such cases continue to challenge our understanding of reality. If NDEs were merely the result of dying brain activity, how could these verifiable perceptions occur? The consistency of these reports, spanning cultures and decades, points to a phenomenon that defies conventional explanations, one that demands deeper scientific exploration into the nature of consciousness itself.
I want to tell you a bit about two parts of my own career in psychical research, and I've been in it since the early 1970s, but I've only been at DOPS since 2003. And the kinds of things that I've been involved in kind of bracket the main part of the DOPS research portfolio. You know, most of DOPS's work has been focused on very detailed case studies and field investigations of various kinds. Because of some personal experiences, I encountered the literature of experimental parapsychology, and while I was working on my dissertation, read enough of it to become convinced that there really seemed to be something there. I mean, these people were using the same kind of methods that I was being taught to study paranormal phenomena. The other thing was that it was clear that if these things existed, it was extremely important because, I mean, the whole point about these phenomena is that they challenge widely held views about what's possible. You know, we use a generic term psi for things like ESP, extrasensory perception, which has several subcategories, psychokinesis, or mind over matter, direct influence on the environment, not using your motor system and all that. And the whole point of both kinds of phenomena is that a person or an organism is exchanging information with the environment despite the presence of some kind of a barrier that conventional classical physical principles would say should prevent that from happening. And it's very easy, it turns out, to set up experiments to test whether these things can happen.
Thank you, John. Thinking more clearly than ever before while your heart has stopped and there's no blood going to your brain. Looking down and seeing your body on the operating table and noticing details, unexpected details that your surgeon later verifies for you. Meeting deceased loved ones, family and friends who you thought were still alive. Meeting deceased people who you don't know, but later recognize from family photos. All these are things that happen in some near-death experiences that may have some bearing on the question of whether we survive death of the body, which is our topic for tonight. Is it possible that our consciousness or our mind survives bodily death? There's a wide range of human experiences that suggest this is exactly the case. Near-death experiences occur to us when we're on the threshold of death, and therefore they raise the possibility that they may teach us something about what happens after death. Now, I've been collecting and analyzing near-death experiences for more than 40 years, and I have detailed information about more than 1,000 of these cases. Each one is unique, filtered through the individual's background and personality. But there are some features that they all share in common. And some of these common features have important bearing on the question of whether we survive death and whether some part of us does, and if so, what part is that? One of these features that may have some bearing on the question of survival is enhanced mental functioning, thinking clearer than ever, seeing more vividly, forming more detailed memories, at a time when your brain is seriously impaired. Now, how is that possible? It seems to defy common sense, and yet it happens. James was a 25-year-old nurse who got deeply depressed and decided to end his life. He took some medications from the hospital where he worked, took an overdose, and lay down on his bed expecting to die. He didn't. In fact, he became sicker and sicker, very nauseous with painful stomach cramps, and decided maybe he better call for some help. So he roused himself, tried to get out of bed and get to a telephone. But by this time, the drugs had kicked in and were making him very unsteady. He had trouble standing, trouble walking. Not only that, but the drugs were making him hallucinate, and he was seeing little people all around his bed, making it hard for him to get to the telephone. At this point, he told me, he drew up out of his body and was several feet above his body and behind it, thinking very clearly. And he looked down at his body, staggering around, looking very confused. He remembered being in the body and hallucinating, but from where he was, up above, he couldn't see these little people. Now that convinced James that his mind and his body were not the same thing. And it suggests that I need to think about that also. Are they the same thing? Another feature common to NDEs that makes us question whether we survive is seeing things accurately from some visual perspective not in the body. This too defies common sense. How can you see if you're not in the body? And yet it happens. Al was a 55-year-old truck driver who went to the emergency room with irregular heartbeat. In the emergency room, during diagnostic testing, his heart condition deteriorated rapidly, and he was rushed to the operating room for what eventually became quadruple bypass surgery. In the middle of this operation, he felt himself rising up out of his body and floating weightless above it. He looked down and, to his surprise, saw himself there, lying on the table, with a sheet over his body. And he saw his surgeon down there, looking very perplexed. And as Al described it, his surgeon was flapping his arms as if he was trying to fly. Al didn't understand that. And frankly, I didn't either. I've been working as a doctor for more than 40 years in hospitals. I'd never seen a surgeon do that. I later talked to Al's doctor and asked him about this. And he acknowledged that, yes, he had done that. That where he had trained in his home country to be a surgeon, he developed this habit. When he walks into the operating room, all scrubbed in, with sterile gloves on, and his residents and interns, his assistants, are starting the operation, he doesn't want to risk touching something not in the sterile field with his clean hands. So he puts them where he knows they won't touch anything sterile. And then he instructs his interns, here, cut over there, pull back over there. So what Al thought was trying to fly was just instructing his assistants on how to do the operation. Now, how did Al know this? How could he see this? This is not an isolated case. A recent survey of more than 100 near-death experiences in which people reported seeing things from an out-of-body perspective found that more than 90% were completely accurate in what they said. Another common feature that people report in NDEs is seeing deceased friends and family. Now, many of us would expect to see deceased loved ones when we die, so that's not so surprising. But sometimes more surprising things happen. For example, people sometimes see deceased loved ones that they thought were still alive. Eddie was a 9-year-old boy who was hospitalized in a coma from meningitis. And he was in a coma for about 36 hours before his fever finally broke. His family were gathered around him by the bedside all night long, and finally about 3 a.m., he opened his eyes and excitedly told his parents that he had just been to heaven and he had seen his dead grandfather and Auntie Rosa and Uncle Lorenzo. And then he said, and I also saw my sister Teresa, who told me I had to come back. Now, Teresa was his older sister who was in college in Vermont, and as far as anyone knew, was perfectly healthy. Later that morning, when his parents went home, they immediately called the college, and they found that Teresa had in fact been killed in a car accident just after midnight. How did Eddie know about that? Jack was a 25-year-old electrical engineer who was hospitalized with pneumonia. One day, as his young nurse, Anita, was fluffing up his pillow, she mentioned to him that this weekend was going to be her 21st birthday, and she was going to be gone for a few days, visiting her parents. Shortly after she left, Jack's condition went downhill, and he had trouble breathing. He eventually stopped breathing entirely. He then had a near-death experience in which he saw Nurse Anita. Surprised to see her there, he said, "What are you doing here?" And she said, "I've come to fluff your pillow up one more time. And I'd like you to go back and tell my parents that I love them and I'm sorry I wrecked the red sports car." When Jack recovered, he told the nurse about this experience. She started tearing up and left the room immediately. Later, Jack learned that Anita's parents had in fact surprised her with a red sports car for her birthday. And excited to try it out, she raced down the highway and crashed into a concrete barrier, dying instantly. Now, how could Jack know this? How could Eddie know this? How can these things happen? And finally, there are some people in near-death experiences who meet what appear to be deceased people who they don't know. Levi was a 35-year-old man who was born in Holland, who had a cardiac arrest. His heart stopped. He had a near-death experience, saw his grandmother who had died, and then saw a man who didn't recognize, but who looked at him very lovingly. He didn't know who this was, didn't know what to make of it, so he didn't talk to anybody about this. 10 years later, when his mother was on her deathbed, she confessed to him that her husband, who had raised Levi as his father, was not in fact his biological father. Levi's biological father was in fact a Jewish man who had been captured by the Nazis when they came into town, taken to a concentration camp, and never seen again. And then his mother showed Levi a photograph of his father, which he recognized immediately as the man from his near-death experience. So we have in near-death experiences heightened mental thoughts when your brain isn't functioning. We have accurate perceptions from outside the body. We have meeting with deceased loved ones who you didn't know had died. We have deceased meetings with loved ones who we didn't know, period. And we don't have a good physical explanation for this. So all these things should make us think about, is there something about us that survives the bodily death? And if so, what is that thing?
Near-death experience, NDE memories, are unlike any other. They are richer, more detailed, and emotionally profound. This challenges the notion that they are mere hallucinations, instead suggesting that they reflect genuine experiences of consciousness beyond the physical body. Contactee insights, a higher reality. Contactees often describe beings who understand consciousness at a cosmic level. These beings convey that death is not the end. It's merely a transition. Many report being told that the soul is eternal and that Earth is a place for growth, learning, and connection. This message is strikingly similar to what near-death experiencers, NDEs, share. Those who have crossed the threshold of death and returned frequently describe encountering luminous beings who impart the same profound wisdom that we are spiritual beings having a temporary human experience, and that our time on Earth serves a greater purpose in the evolution of the soul. Beings with a higher level of awareness and understanding could have access to this information and now seem to be edging us toward realizing this truth ourselves. As these experiences become more widely discussed and accepted in our culture, it suggests that we are on the verge of a greater awakening. At some point, these two seemingly separate yet deeply connected phenomena, contact experiences and NDEs, may intersect in a way that expands our collective consciousness. Perhaps just as these advanced beings seem to be guiding us now, we too will one day help those who have yet to reach this awareness, beings who may not yet understand their own spiritual nature, when we have evolved not just technologically, but spiritually as well. But I believe there is a core belief in our culture that is violated by the alien abduction phenomenon, namely the total separation of the spirit and the physical world. We have made that gulf inviolate, relegating to religion the spirit, subjective world, and assigning to science the material, objective, domain. We simply do not know what to do with a phenomenon that crosses that seemingly inviolable barrier. It shocks the foundations of our belief structure. Our minds have no place to put such a thing. John E. Mack, Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens. As we wrap up this journey through UFO encounters, abductees, near-death experiences, and the stories of near-death experiences, one truth becomes clear: consciousness is at the heart of it all. Whether through contact with non-human intelligences, glimpses into the afterlife, or the profound transformations experiencers undergo, these phenomena challenge the idea that reality is limited to the physical. Instead, they suggest that consciousness is expansive, non-local, and deeply interconnected with realms beyond our current understanding. Perhaps the greatest takeaway is that these experiences are not isolated. They weave together into a larger picture of who we are and what we're capable of. If consciousness can transcend time, space, and even death, then what else might we be capable of? The answers may not be found in a lab or government disclosure, but within us, waiting to be explored. Until next time, keep questioning, keep expanding, and stay open to the mysteries that surround us.
Our healthcare system